Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Northern Film Review. This week, we've got a really great show for you, interviewing Dan and Marcel, the creators of this wonderful experimental short film full of wonderful little elements and fantastic little violency bits and all sorts. It's a wonderful film, and we've got them here on the show as our first interview for the Northern Film Review. And we'll be talking about their directorial bits, working in lockdown, working on experimental films, and some little interesting tidbits that I feel will be quite interesting to talk about. So, yeah.
The Northern Film Review, with your hosts, Oliver Ellis and Luke Simpson.
Hello, Luke. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I'm nice and refreshed from a 2 to 3 week break over Christmas.
Yes, we haven't podcasted or radioed in quite a long time, and it's good to get back, isn't it?
It feels natural now. I'm really happy to be back. Excited for the podcast we've got in for you today, and for future podcasts.
Yes, it is a very exciting show. We do have to give sort of trigger warnings to some descriptions of sexually explicit material and the mention of self-harm through the show. So look out for that. It's nothing too graphic. There's no swearing in this. It's really relatively sort of PG-13, but give you trigger warnings for that. But yeah, it's a very interesting show because we just recorded it, and we're going to. It's very confusing doing it like this because you're like, it's not the sort of the chronological flow. And you're like, oh god, we're recording this now. Yeah. It's messing with my brain a bit. But it's very interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're thinking you're going to all enjoy it. But this time, got sort of a big directive to sort of get more people on the show. Interview them a bit more, and yeah, just generally have quite a bit more fun with the show. Because I think last time, I'm sure you'll agree, Luke, was a bit sort of stagnant in what we did for the shows. It was good because we're amazing.
Yeah,
but,
I think the listeners might hear something different with my microphone. I've actually upgraded.
Yes, you have.
Finally.
You've got quite a nice microphone now, haven't you?
Yeah. Blue Yeti, lovely.
Ooh.
It's quite a big upgrade from like a £30 little plastic thingy. But we're up.
Always building. Yeah, I think always getting good audio quality on podcasts is a must. I feel, and we've upped our game, upped our sort of stuff, which is going to be quite exciting because we love podcasting. We love talking about films. But you kind of need to up that audio quality a bit.
Yeah.
I think that's always an interesting thing. So, hopefully you're going to enjoy the show. And Luke, do you want to say anything before we hand them over to Dan and Marcel?
Yeah, well, it's not that they haven't just made an experimental film. We as a film school, we've just finished our module of experimental film. So myself, I've made an experimental film, and so has Oliver. So we have insights in it, so that's why we can ask these questions and stuff like that. But
yes,
and that's why we've not been really active over Christmas. Really, we've had to do this project, which is
mind-bendingly difficult.
Yes, quite hard, and we needed a rest as well. So the days that we were free, we were probably crashed on the sofa watching movies. So
yeah, I think. We thought about doing sort of the show on our experimental films, but I felt that was a bit self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
We're so great. Let's spend an hour talking about our film.
No, it's my film.
And I think, although I think Luke's film is very good, and I think ours is very interesting.
And vice versa.
And yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm sure we might link our films in the description as well. My film was like an animated sort of experience, and I think yours was very similar to that. And I feel like perhaps Dan and Marcel's have a bit more to talk about
Yeah, definitely. And theirs is longer as well, so they have more to talk about rather than my 2-minute short experimental film and your 3-minute short experimental film.
Yeah.
And they have very interesting characters as well, so and it's good to get a different voice on the podcast as well, just to give a different insight in the filmmaking process and
and
how
I
they
think that's
work.
quite interesting. But before we start to ramble into non-existence, here are Dan and Marcel.
Welcome back to the Northern Film Review.
Hello everybody, so we're here with Dan and Marcel, and we're going to be talking about their wonderful experimental film. So they're from the Northern Film School, just like we are, the best film school in the country. And we've all been working on this module called experimental film. And obviously everyone in the class worked on this, and everyone was like, oh, okay, let's make an experimental film of me jumping around in a pink suit. But we all submitted our work, and we found that Dan and Marcel's film was really quite interesting and a lot of good points to it, and was quite spectacular. So, without further ado, here's Dan and Marcel. Hello.
Hello.
Hey. Here we
Thank you for having us.
It's all right. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah. So, your film, it's quite an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
A nice way to put it is unique.
Unique, yes. Well, I suppose because it's an experimental film, isn't it? They're all a bit unique. But this one, I think, perhaps is more unique in that sense. So tell us about it a little. Tell us about what it is, the synopsis of it.
Sure. So I guess in a sentence or so, it's a man who's struggling with his intrusive thoughts and a self-perpetuating spiral of impulse and compulsion as he tries to kind of sort out the busyness of his mind.
Okay, cool. So that's quite an interesting sort of concept to go for, isn't it, really? So how did you come about that when you were making the film? Was it just something that just came to you, or was it just something that like you've been developing for quite a while?
Well, there's a bit of an interesting kind of development history. It started off, I was more interested in the idea of sensory overload, just as more of an intellectual concept, without applying it to, a character so much. And then over the weeks, Marcel and I, we developed a sort of outline, but it ended up being a bit too messy. And we kind of streamlined it to a compulsion. I was a bit inspired by obsessive compulsive disorder. And I knew that I couldn't make a film that accurately depicted that and make the sort of film I wanted to make at the same time. So it's not really a film about OCD, but there are a couple of potential links about, compulsions and those thoughts that you can have.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So it's just sort of about, I suppose in a way, it's sort of quite a lot about mental health. And I was in the development process. So me, Dan and Marcel were all sort of in the same tutorial group. And it's interesting to see it go from one point to the next. And I think, because you filmed it all, because obviously we filmed all of our experimental films in lockdown, didn't we?
Yeah.
And you had quite an interesting way to sort of direct Dan and go through the making of the film. So I just want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, go for it, Marcel. Take it away.
Okay. So, the way that we thought would be best to tackle it, because we were both in separate households, was to kind of split the duties a little bit. But there was a lot of crossover. There weren't really kind of defined roles. So he did some directing, I did some directing. He did some lighting, I did some lighting. It was kind of a crossover, but it was interesting because a lot of it was almost like virtual directing. He set up a stand behind the camera, behind the little LCD screen, and then put me on Messenger video. So I'm looking at just like a blob of pixels, and Dan would come to me and he'd be like, "So what did you think of that performance?" And I'll be like, yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, we would kind of go on Zoom and look over the rushes and kind of say, yeah, this was good. And maybe let's reshoot this. This moment doesn't work, or this really does. And then it was a lot of kind of bringing it to other people and having them watch it and see how they react to it. And
was there a certain reaction you wanted to go for from people? Get from
we
people?
were generally hoping that they would feel quite uncomfortable and disconcerted. We sort of decided to go for what I call a bit more of a bittersweet ending, instead of ending on all the kind of harrowing imagery. But it was that kind of feeling of not quite knowing whether to empathize with the character or not. And we got that. I asked a couple of kind of peers who I knew would give me honest feedback, and they did. We reshot the whole of the first scene due to some of that feedback, which was a lot of fun. Reshoots are incredible. I highly urge everybody, when you shoot your film, just mess it up and reshoot the whole thing. It makes it so much easier. But
fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, they said it's weird. At points I almost wanted to laugh and then felt bad about it, and I think that kind of summed up some elements of it quite nicely. The sort of self-reflective element.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was I got that from watching it as well, and I think it was interesting because, like you said, you had to keep sending it to people and doing this sort of online sort of directorial sort of method. Do you think there's any benefit of like carrying this method on post-lockdown, or do you think it's sort of something you'll leave within the COVID world of like online Facebook Messenger directing?
I can give my quick view, but I think Marcel, being the one who was directing over it, would know. But I'd say, from my perspective, not necessarily the physical limitations of directing over Zoom or over Facebook, but more putting emphasis on rehearsals and directing in rehearsals. I think it definitely highlighted to me the importance of rehearsals, especially for non-professional actors.
Definitely. And I mean, to add to that, I think that what I feel like the reason that the film works is because we had so much prep. I mean, we really went through kind of everything. We prepped every sort of room, every outfit per the day. Each day in the story, we kind of worked toward having that all prepared. I mean, if we weren't, like conventionally, when I normally direct, I'm kind of, it's going to sound dumb, but I'm kind of spontaneous and I just work with the actors in the moment and kind of what feels right. But for this, it really was a matter of trying to get everything prepped and clear so we were as efficient as possible.
Yeah. So overall, how long prep time plus filming time, how long do you reckon altogether how long do you think you took on the film?
Okay, well, pre-production from the beginning would have been, a month and a bit. But from where we had an almost finalized idea to being ready to shoot, I would say maybe 3 weeks. We spent a lot of time. We decided to base the staging around the design of the rooms to try to give each room a different atmosphere, which is quite different because normally I would kind of leave that as a complement to the actual staging, whereas here we kind of combine those a lot more.
Yeah, so that's quite a long development for a short film, isn't it, really?
And then, sorry.
Carry on. No, carry on.
I was just going to say the actual shooting, we probably took longer than we expected. It was probably about one scene and a bit a day, for certain ones a couple of days. It was just, because I had to move the camera, the lights, and everything, and it just took quite a long time. There are a lot of little kind of jerry rigs. I put my camera in lots of places that it's dangerous to put a camera. If I'd had a university kit, no way I could have got away with health and safety. I had the curtain hangers, and I was kind of taping the tripod to that over the desk. I had it balanced over the top of the stairs, and it was just secured by one scarf and a lot of willpower. And every time I came back up the stairs, I think Marcel will remember, I'd sometimes accidentally nudge the tripod, and every single time I was like, oh God, no, please. And I just hold my hands out and I'd say to Marcel, wait, no, you got to give me 5 seconds. I've got to make sure this doesn't fall down the stairs. And he's like, okay, cool. All right.
That's the definition of a janky setup, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What camera was it? Because it's an expensive camera, isn't it?
It's a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, which is really, really good for the price. It's
lovely. I was using an iPhone 6S. Lovely.
Yeah, we were pretty fortunate because I've invested in quite a lot of kit over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
But most of it was shot with natural light. We just augmented bits every so often. I mean, Marcel, if it's all right with you guys, you can maybe talk a bit about the sort of lighting, visual style and stuff, maybe.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah.
So give us a lowdown, because like you said, natural lighting, what comes to mind instantly is that it's like the film like The Lobster, where it's shot entirely with natural lighting. So give us a bit of a lowdown of why you wanted to go that direction and why natural lighting bit.
Yeah. I mean, two things. One, purely practically, we knew that, with the pace that we were going at, and sort of with Dan being the only one physically on set, it wouldn't be practical to have too many kind of complicated setups or anything like that. We wanted to be sort of really streamline it down to something that was quick and efficient. And then secondly, myself and I think Dan as well are both just a fan of natural light. I mean, it's really kind of hard to mimic the quality of natural light. It's just so beautiful and soft and flattering. And so it was really like we laid out kind of what time each scene would be in chronological order and worked with with the sun to try to get to shoot at that right point. So, if for a specific scene toward the end of the film, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's sort of a tense moment. We've got this like sun that's blaring in, making this hard, deafening shadow on the back wall, and kind of it's almost like unnecessarily harsh, but I think it really works for the moment. So we practically it made sense, and then also for the story, we wanted something that felt really natural and personal. I think really personal, nothing kind of studio or anything that felt too kind of cultivated, something that felt really raw and authentic. So
yeah, I was thinking, because we've just been doing cinematography and we've literally just learned about lighting and natural lighting. Did you use anything to manipulate the natural light, like a bounce board or anything like that?
I think we considered it, but generally it was fine without. We did a lot of tests in each room to figure out, what time everything would be. And we're very fortunate in the study, for example, both of the windows are facing, I believe it's east and is it south, maybe, or north, whichever one has the light hitting. So we actually got quite a lot of light into the rooms. So mainly it was just natural, apart from stuff in the evening, which we would then kind of light ourselves.
Yeah,
that's super interesting. I love that sort of naturalistic approach, and it definitely comes through in the film. I think when I've seen the film quite a lot now, and I think we'll get onto one of the elements why that's a bit sort of jarring for everyone to watch it many times. But it definitely comes through the amount of work that you put into it, and the sort of the all of the elements that really come together and make sort of a very vibrant and sort of well thought out film. And it's quite amazing because it's how long is it? About 10 minutes, isn't it?
I think
12
about
minutes.
12, isn't it? Yeah.
And for two people working in lockdown remotely and directing over Facebook Messenger is truly fantastic for the sort of what comes out with the end product of the film. It's truly a testament to the film. But it kind of brings me on to sort of one of the more sort of, let's say, interesting elements of the film. So feel free to not talk about this if you don't want to, but like there's because you acted in it, Dan, didn't you?
Yeah.
And there's sort of a lot of self-harm, obviously acted out, not actually done in the film. And there's also a very sort of there's a masturbation scene in it as well, sort of full
there is, yeah.
So why sort of in the way? Okay, I'm sorry, Luke.
Yeah, there's not a nice way to say why you did it. It's like, why?
Yeah. Because I was there in development, I was like, is this needed? But I think it does work in the sort of the film a bit of it. So why did you sort of include it in the end?
Okay, so originally the scene was put in there to try to highlight the shame of the character. This was before it was more kind of intent on exploring intrusive thoughts. And it was to show shame and almost a sort of pathetic, but not quite pathetic viewpoint. And then through every development, Marcel and I would talk and we'd say, because at that point, we kind of figured I would be the one acting. And he'd say, I mean, I think it works for the story. And I'd be like, I think it works for the story, so we'll keep it. And every single time we did a review of it and we had like a new draft or a new edition, we'd have the same conversation. We'd say, is it still needed? And we both say, I think so. I think so. And it got to the actual shooting of it and it was okay. I don't know what it is about me. I don't think I'm an exhibitionist. When it came down to the crunch, I thought, you know what? I'm doing this for the craft. I'm doing it for the craft. And it was just, I thought it was so absurd and funny, thinking about the context of why it's happening, that I'm actually sending this film to my tutors and they're going to see my penis. Just that fact itself, it's just so insane that I felt okay doing it.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully Marcel felt all right editing it.
Yeah. How many hours of footage do you have to go through of just looking at that?
I mean, it's great because when we got, we were, like I said, I'm on kind of Messenger for most of the time, and we get to the day, and we're kind of there around the the time when Dan's gonna go and do it, and I ask him, I'm like, do you want me to be there while you're doing it? and he's like, no, it's okay. You can just edit it when it's done.
It's funny because it's kind of gathered quite a cult following within the students of the film school. It kind of someone said, "Oh, have you seen so and so? Have you seen Dan's films?" Like, no, why? Sends the link, and then you're like, just wait a minute. Now, like, oh, okay.
Okay.
No, carry on.
Sorry. My friend Tom Tutus in first year, he was one of the people I asked for some feedback. So he'd seen it, and someone had managed to get a little clip of it, and they put it in the first year chat. And for some reason, he'd mentioned Marcel, and they all thought it was Marcel instead of me. So now all the first years think that it's Marcel's penis in the film.
Lovely.
How do you feel about that, Marcel? Are you a bit sort of...
I mean...
is it overcompensating, or is it a compliment, or is it quite interesting? No,
Marcel is much bigger. Much bigger. Not that I would know, but it is.
No.
Is this a sequel? It's just Marcel instead. Oh God, I don't really know how to get that. But yeah, it is quite interesting. I think it does work. I think perhaps when I was in the tutorials, I did give my sort of word of sort of caution to the wind.
Yeah.
I was like, is this perhaps needed? Could you have just gone it from the face? But what it kind of reminded me of is Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson a bit, and how they have sort of the a scene where Scarlett Johansson's like bringing in sort of fully naked men, and it's all sort of a bit off. It reminded me of that a little bit, and I kind of got that vibe when I watched it for the third time, and I was like, yeah, this kind of makes it sort of what it is, and it is quite interesting. I'm kind of glad you kept it in the end.
Cheers.
I do have a question as well. How important is it to get honest feedback with in the filmmaking process. Just because I think you don't want people to lie, do you?
No. I think honesty is really important because I'd like to think that both Marcel and I are mature enough to think that we're good without knowing that we're not bad sometimes. So for me, if someone says, personally, I think this scene is terrible, everything about every life decision you made up until the point of shooting this scene, I wish had never happened. That's how bad it is. It just forces you to take a quick step back. And if I thought, I did like that scene, actually, I'll link this in. We had a scene that we shot, 2 scenes that were both my ideas, and we cut both of them because they were bad. They just didn't work. And yeah, sure, I was a little bit upset because I thought it could have been a good idea, but they didn't work. And having the kind of honesty and openness to be able to just let go was quite liberating. So yeah, definitely 100% honest. Doesn't mean I'll necessarily agree.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I did kind of agree with most of the criticism, and I think it's a better film because of it.
You can learn from it, can't you? That's the whole point of honest feedback. You need that. Yes, you may be upset for like a few minutes, saying, "Oh, I really like this scene," but honesty is the best. To become a better
policy.
Yeah, to become a better filmmaker, you need to hit bumps in the road, and you need to hit stuff like that to become a better filmmaker, don't you? So
yeah,
definitely.
But like, carry on. Sorry, Marcel.
Sorry. And I think that kind of to a certain extent, I think it's so important to show your work before it's done and get feedback, because you'll have this idea in your head and you have built up all this backstory, and then you send it to somebody and they have none of that. They have no context. So they watch it as it is. And that's what you really want. You want them to watch it as it is and to tell you truthfully, oh no, this doesn't work, because in your mind you may have justified it with, all of this, all of these thoughts, but they don't have that. So I think it's really important to share it with people before you finish your work, for sure.
I was going to say also to do with sharing. Do you think you should share it to 2 different audiences? So, to like a filmmaking audience and to a non-filmmaking audience. Do you think that's a quite a viable option?
I would say definitely. I mean, it's interesting because I sent the film to my parents to watch, and I asked them. I had sent it to them kind of earlier, but I said wait because I want to watch your guys' reaction when you watch it. I want to kind of read you while you're doing it and see what works and what didn't. So I was watching it, and I watched it both with my mom and my dad. And I also, in regards to the masturbation, I spoke with them about it both. And I asked my mom, I said, do you think this is too much? Is it gratuitous? It's like, does it feel like it's, an important part of the film? And she said, yeah, which surprised me, to be honest. But also,
props to Marcel's mum.
I was going to say, how did your mum react to the scene, Dan?
Well, I told my parents about it, and they weren't particularly excited about the idea. I think they were saying to me, do you want people to see this? And I said, to be honest, if people want to laugh because they see my willy, or maybe they think my willy isn't quite as big as people would think my willy is, I don't mind. If people think I have a small willy, I don't care. Whatever, I think they were both worried that it could harm a potential future career, but I would think most people in the world, I'd say, definitely the more developed world, most people masturbate, often to relieve stress. And that was mainly what we wanted to convey, that the stress of the character built to such an extent that they're forced to take time out of their working day just to masturbate, to feel that momentary relief before their intrusion set back in again. So with that, I explained it's about stress, and they didn't get that so much, which is fair enough. I guess they're not the target demographic, but they weren't a huge fan of it, I guess, and they haven't become a huge fan of it since. So I told him as a joke I'd get them an extreme close-up version just for them.
Lovely.
It's funny because both of my parents, they both really liked the film. My dad really liked it when he first watched it. My mom wasn't quite so sold on it. And then I kind of pitched it to her because, and explained it to kind of both of them, and they both really like it now, and they both are really kind of happy with what we've done, and both also really impressed with Dan for, I mean, you have to see the film to know what I mean, but damn, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great film, and I think you can definitely see the effort that's been put into it. I think, yeah, I mean, it is an experimental film, and I think it perhaps brings us onto the sort of the broader question of saying, why do you think it is an experimental film, and do you think it is an experimental film?
Okay, I'm happy to do a little bit first, but I will try my best not to ramble. If I do, you two or Marcel, just tell me to shut up, and I will.
Don't you worry, we will.
Thank you. I would say we didn't go into the project wanting to make an experimental film. We wanted to make a film that was experimental. We didn't want to make any choices thinking, oh, it would be experimental if we did this. We thought, how can we use the experimental form to help tell an interesting story? So for us, that was, just cutting to things in his head, which at first we were thinking of trying split screens. And we did a couple tests of it, and we found that it drew a bit too much attention to itself. And I think for a film with no dialogue, it was very important that we tried to maintain believability and engagement as far as possible. And having that split screen just did the opposite of that. So we just kind of flashed clips over the top instead. So I'd say, yes, it has experimental elements. And I could talk more about the context of experimental film maybe, but I'll give Marcel a bit of a chance to get a word in before I accidentally splurge a whole essay over this microphone.
No, you can. It's okay.
You
Go
sure?
on.
Okay.
Yeah, go
okay. So often when Marcel and I have worked together, we don't necessarily have specific inspirations that we don't say we want this to be a mix of Darren Aronofsky and Yorgos Lanthimos, with a bit of I don't know, someone else sprinkled in. We kind of think, what's the story we want to tell? And then we just inform certain elements of the pre-production with certain frames. So we had, I don't know if you've seen Requiem for a Dream by Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
But we thought, what if we could show some sort of addiction or compulsion or something similar to that in a similar way? And that was partially an inspiration for what I would say Marcel's brilliantly cut scene with all the self-harm imagery that isn't exactly the same. He tried doing something. Actually, you tell Marcel about doing something a bit more musical and why it didn't work.
Sure. Yeah, originally we had sort of the intention for that sequence toward the end of the film to be kind of like what Dan had just said, really musical. I mean, he had sent me a track as kind of an inspiration. I can't remember the specific track. You probably remember, Dan, what
I think it was We Love You by the Pineapple Thief. And Marcel originally thought I meant, can we have this in the background? And he was like, I'm not sure. And I realized, and I was like, no, I didn't mean that. Please, you have to believe me.
It was we were going to have sort of this, well, I'll give sort of a quick trigger warning for self-harm. But we were going to have this sequence toward the end of the film, and it was going to be really kind of melodic and rhythmic, and have this cutting back to these sounds, and for it just to be sort of a soundscape that was built out, and when we got, this is a moment in the film when essentially he's breaking down, and we see these intrusive thoughts rushing in, and it's almost kind of overwhelming. He pretty much snaps at the end of the sequence. But when I started to cut it with kind of with that music as an inspiration in my mind, it felt almost like too clean and comfortable, and we wanted that the rough kind of uncontrollable. It had to feel like it was out of his control, and it couldn't be. It just felt too cool. It had that coolness that we wanted something rougher and more unpredictable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably a really bad explanation, but
no, it's fine. Don't worry.
It's great.
It's interesting because I think obviously me and Luke made an experimental film, so it's difficult to sort of. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to talk about experimental films, and you could keep talking about it as much as you want. But I think that brings me on to my next question: is perhaps because experimental film, because I've talked about this before on other radio shows and other podcasts, is perhaps not as popular as other experimental forms of art. So experimental music, experimental sort of painting and stuff like that. Experimental dance, yes, even that. Why do you think that perhaps experimental film or more avant-garde film is perhaps not as popular as those other formats?
I would say potentially with film, there's more of an emotional investment into it. With music, personally, I find music very emotional, and maybe a lot of other people do too. But if you're just listening to a song out of an intellectual desire to think, oh, I want to try listening to this. Let's say you're on Spotify or Deezer or SoundCloud, and it might be 3 minutes and you hear that song, you're like, oh, I quite like that. Maybe I'll try the whole album or the EP or whatever it is. And with dance, I'd say because dance is such a sort of fluid art form, you can kind of tweak that in a few different ways. And again, it can still be very visually kind of fantastic. With film, if you have a character, I feel that engaging with a character can be quite tiring. Watching films can be quite tiring when you've got to make that emotional investment into someone. And that combined with the length, I find that quite a few experimental short films, they're not necessarily particularly short. I know yours, Oliver, was it 3-4 minutes, which felt like a very nice length for it. It felt whole and kind of complete in that time. But quite a few experimental films tend to kind of push the length a little bit. And I think because of that, and if you have a character, that sort of implicit feeling that you should try to connect with them, while at the same time being presented with visuals and structures that are quite intellectually demanding. I think altogether that perhaps could be why, as a medium, experimental film can be a bit harder for people to kind of enjoy and become engrossed in.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll have to agree with that completely. And it's quite interesting to sort of talk about experimental film. And it does happen to be quite long form sometimes, experimental films, especially stuff at Secret Cinema, that our film club that happens every Thursday with Dan Belden. Some of them are quite long and quite gratuitous. So we're coming to the end of this interview bit of the thing. So we talked about masturbation, we talked about sort of self-harm, we talked about experimental film and all that. And it is a very, very interesting film, and it's a fantastically made film. And I think it's truly a testament to sort of lockdown work and lockdown sort of artisticness. And it's worked really well, and it's sort of fantastically well made. So I definitely recommend watching it, and I'm sure we'll find a link to it and we'll put that in the description of our YouTube video. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful film, and you can definitely see the sort of the inspirations coming from it. So yes, we'd like to thank you guys for coming. Oh, sorry, Karen. I was
gonna say, just quick before you go, would you like to see more experimental techniques in blockbusters or in feature-length films, such as Colour in Space and Mandy? They use quite a lot of experimental techniques. Do you think they should do more films like that?
I mean, it's interesting. I think that with me and Dan, kind of what we did is, it's like, we're not going to use a technique unless we can really justify it. If it's going to be the best choice for the film, if it's going to be the best, for example, using split screen, if it's going to work for that moment, or is it going to take away from that moment? I like a lot of sort of classic techniques and split screen, split diopter. I like a lot of different now they would be classified as quote unquote experimental, but techniques. And yeah, I'd love to see them in more kind of modern blockbusters and more modern filmmaking overall. But as long as it really works for the film, and for the moment, if it doesn't really work for the narrative, then not really.
I think definitely we should have more. Like a lot of those experimental techniques. There was the famous time lapse in I'm going to butcher the name, but it's something like Koyanisti kind of documentary. It's not that, it's pronounced correctly, that I didn't do. But it was a film with a time lapse in it from many decades ago. And now, time lapses are used in music videos, corporate videos, videography. And I think that the scope of what you can do with the video and film format is become so widespread now that over the years, these originally experimental ideas are kind of recontextualized. Like if you think about certain elements of films where you imagine seeing the first split screen ever for the first time, that would be wild. It's like there are two pictures on the screen at the same time. What? And now, you can have a phone call between two people with a split screen, and it's like, yeah, it's a conversation they're having over the phone. So I think experimental short form is a great way to try new techniques that over time can then kind of be added to the pool of cinematic language.
Okay, cool. I'm just sort of conscious on time here. So we'll wrap up here. And we'll say thank you to Dan and Marcel for coming on. Big round of applause. There we go. So yeah, check that film out. We'll leave it in the description of our YouTube video, if there is a link. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week for the podcast to come around again. And hopefully you've enjoyed this interview.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cool. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview with Dan and Marcel talking about their film. Hopefully you weren't sort of a bit weirded out by the masturbation talking bit through it. But it was a good interview, don't you think, Luke?
I do. And it was my first time ever interviewing any properly in a podcast format. It was my first time interviewing anyone, so it was quite interesting to learn from it. And I think hopefully we might do more interviews later on.
Yeah, it was really good. I love doing interviews, and I love sort of getting people's points of view on stuff. And Dan and Marcel are really fluid at talking about the film, and it's interesting to sort of hear their sort of creative process. And I'm always interested in sort of other people's creative process, because sometimes you think, am I in a bubble? Am I just sort of thinking about this? Should I have put this much effort into this film? And like sort of hearing a sort of them talk about their films is really sort of warming to me. I'm like, yeah, that's good. I'm glad that there's people out there like you.
Yeah, and there were some really important points for the filmmaking process that we mentioned in there as well, especially with feedback and stuff like that, which is very important. And I do think
it gives us sort of the trusted individuals to show your work to, because we have a couple of people for this podcast that we have that they listen to, and they're like, oh yeah, that bit was good, this bit was bad. Like our friend Luke, who I call him the other Luke, and when I talk to him, I call you the other Luke. And there's sort of the level of and it's good sort of sending it to people, getting their feedback, and it's always good to get their honest feedback. So I think sometimes people are a bit they dance around the subject and they don't want to sort of hurt you, and they're like but I think it's definitely important to sort of give honest feedback.
Yeah, definitely. I had feedback from my microphone. That's why I've changed it and stuff like that. So it's
my constant berating of you is like, Luke, you gotta get a better microphone.
New microphone. You sound like a robot.
Yeah, and it's good to improve your art, and I think that's the best way to do it, really. And like I said, Dan and Marcel are really good to talk to, and hopefully in the next coming weeks we'll have some more people on the show to interview. Perhaps not interviewing about their stuff, their film, but we'll get people from our course, because we don't know that many famous people. Unless you're a famous person listening to this podcast right now.
You're welcome on any time.
And we'll get people on to talk about their favourite film and get a bit more of an in-depth fan perspective of film. Because I think sometimes we talk about films from last term, and we like the films, but we're perhaps not the biggest fans of them. But we want to get sort of the people who know a lot about these films and the experts on these films.
So hopefully get them to talk about their like favorite film, and hopefully they'll have a lot to talk about and little insights that they've learned over the time researching it. Because I know for me personally, I if it's a film I like, I delve deep in it and just research it quite a bit.
Yeah, and we love watching films and we love hearing people's perspectives. And it's definitely sort of watching films and filmmaking is definitely something that you got to like share with people, isn't it? Like, you know, I like doing this podcast because we get to share our love for films together, and it's very interesting.
Because say definitely last season, you showed me Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which was widened my views on cinematography and stuff like that. So.
Also, our most listened to podcast on YouTube for some reason. I don't know why. It's like
an obscure French film wins us.
I suppose it's kind of people. There's probably not a lot of content out there on it, so it gets more views maybe. I don't know, but hopefully this semester we're really putting in the effort to make our podcast a lot better. So we've got someone dedicated to sort of making us thumbnails now, and we've got sort of more research into the films and stuff like that. And like this show today, we're going to be sort of getting interviewees and people to come on our show and talk about stuff. But yeah, it's very interesting. Are you excited? Are you excited for the new semester, Luke?
I am so excited.
Yes, it's going to be a good one. So hopefully you enjoy the show, and hopefully you'll be back with us next week on Saturdays. I think we broadcast at 12. It is 12 to 1, I think, which will be a lot of fun. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll meet us back next week. I've been Oliver.
I've been Luke.
And make sure to check us out on our Instagram, the Northern Film Review Podcast on Instagram, the Northern Film Review Podcast.
And same with our YouTube channel.
Yeah. So check us out on YouTube. Very interesting stuff. Just recording of our show we do on LSR, but
you can listen to it any
time and without the interruptions of music. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
The Northern Film Review, with your hosts Oliver Ellis and Luke Simpson.